I sold this table on the Facebook Marketplace. The only problem with that is that this table didn't actually exist. Maybe it exists somewhere, but I definitely don't own it. So today, I'm going to show you how to make that coffee table. I tried to find the best configuration for the coffee table, and it looks like it can be made out of 4 2x6s. We only need 2 different sized boards. We have to cut some to 37 inches and some to 22. If you're limited on tools, all of the cuts can be made with a circular saw. To make sure you're cutting straight, you can use a speed square. Line up the saw blade with the mark from earlier, and use the speed square to guide it. This will help make sure that your cut stays straight. I do have a miter saw, so I ended up using that for most of the cuts. I didn't want anyone to feel limited, because this can honestly be made with simple hand tools. You're going to need 8 boards that are 37 inches long, and then 2 boards that are 22 inches long. Assembled, they should look something like this. This is just to give you an idea. I haven't actually secured anything in place, but you can see that the 22-inch boards sit between the 37-inch boards. I used pocket hole screws for this assembly. You'll have to drill a hole to make space for the screw, since this will be sitting about 3/4 of an inch deeper than the surface. To make sure that was the case, I measured the drill bit in reference to the wood. I only wanted the drill bit to reach about half the depth of the wood, so I marked it out with tape. This is a quick and easy way to make sure you're not drilling too far and that you're leaving some wood for the screw to hang onto. I started laying out my boards, and this is going to be the bottom side. Then I started drilling all the spaces for my pocket hole screws. As long as I didn't go past the masking tape, I knew that the holes should be a perfect depth every time. After that, I added some wood glue to where my boards would sit, and I started securing them using the pocket hole screws. The screws are pretty strong, but the wood glue is going to help make this a little bit stronger. You'll need to do this to every board on the bottom side, but don't start the top side yet. Instead, we're going to take a moment to start sanding. It's easier to sand at this point because if you turn the piece upside down, you still have access to the inside. Since the wood was pretty smooth, I started with 100 grit sandpaper and then moved on to 200. Then I laid the final boards on top. Then I used a combination square to mark out a line about 3/4 of an inch inset. This side is actually going to be visible, so we have to make sure we're more precise with our markings. I then used a scrap piece of plywood to reference the long side and create a cross. The piece of plywood was only about an inch wide. This would give me standard markings on each board, and now I can drill them out. With the markings in place, you can line up the top boards just like you did with the bottom ones. Once everything's aligned, all you have to do is screw the boards into place. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to keep seeing projects like this in the future, and if you just want to let me know how the channel's doing, feel free to leave a comment. With everything in place, we can cover up those holes now. I believe we were using a 1/2 inch drill bit, and all you have to do is get a dowel that's the corresponding size. After you cover the dowel in wood glue, you can just go ahead and put that into the area that you drilled out. You can then wipe off the excess glue and use a flush trim saw to cut off the remainder of the dowel. Once this area dries, you can sand it down to a flat surface again. You'll still see the dowel mark, but presentation is everything. And as long as you take your time with the dowels, they can actually be a nice detail. Once the top surface is sanded, you can move on to staining. For this project, I use Varathane's Early American Wood Stain. My process for staining is super simple. I just use a rag to wipe the stain on, and then I use a clean rag to wipe the stain off. I started by staining the bottom of the table so that I can attach the legs once that's dry. And these are just some 4-inch hairpin legs that I got off of Amazon, since the table is supposed to sit pretty low. To standardize our position on the bottom of the table, I used a scrap piece of plywood from earlier. This piece is 3/4 of an inch thick, which meant that the leg was pretty easy to inset by about that amount. I just made sure that my scrap piece of plywood sat flush with the end of the table. Of course, this all happens a lot faster if you have an extra set of hands. With the legs in place, I turned the table over and stained the top. But before that, I just wanted to do a sturdiness test, and it passed, which means that you can pretty much take it anywhere. Jokes aside, I finished staining the rest of the coffee table. Once that was done, the last step was to clear coat it. I normally use Varathane's water-based polyurethane, and I apply it with a foam brush. Once you give this a few coats, you're all done.